Yesterday, Juke announced a change to the game that caused a lot of controversy and debate, with many veterans and players saying that this is the most controversial change in the game's history. What did Juke do? There was a brand new FPS cap introduced to Johto. Your frame rate that you play on could not be above 75 frames per second. The reason for this is because, and I quote, "This is done because FPS unlockers can give players a substantial advantage in some towers. It can even be considered exploiting. We have, however, allowed the frame rate to be unlocked up to 75 FPS, as that is the point where there is a noticeable difference in physics." Many people have been outraged and very mad at Juke to this change. On the other side though, prominent community members in private discords and DMs have been being disrespectful to people who are against the change, with some even going as far as saying quit the game if you don't like the change, which unfortunately, very skilled players have left due to this. So what was the real reason this cap was introduced? Will it do anything to help the game? Let's go ahead and get right into it and get to the bottom of this. Before we even start, we need to go to the bare bone basics. What is even a frame, and what does frames per second mean? Well, when you're watching a video or anything on a screen, what you are watching is essentially a super quick slideshow. What happens is there are a lot of pictures that you see every second to give an illusion of something happening smoothly, when in reality, it's a bunch of pictures changing extremely quickly. Each one of these pictures is called a frame. And for everyday use, you typically use applications and see screens at 60 frames per second. Meaning every second you are looking at 60 different photos. This video is even made at 60 frames per second. So the next time, or even right now when you're watching a video, it's just a really quick slideshow with audio over it. That's why videos take a lot more room and storage than photos, because you're storing 60 photos a second with audio data. The reason why 60 FPS is very popular is due to most screens having a refresh rate of 60 Hz, which is pretty much a very fancy way of saying this screen can show you 60 frames in a second. However, more expensive gaming monitors can have higher refresh rates. A typical what is called a high frequency monitor is 144 or 165 Hz, meaning you can see more than double on these screens than a typical one, which therefore makes a smoother and nicer experience. Some very high-end monitors can even go up to 240 Hz, which is actually the monitor I use every day, even with a brand new monitor which came out recently, even being 360 Hz. That's 6 times as fast as your everyday refresh rate. So how is this information relevant? Well, Roblox's FPS is, well, you guessed it, 60 FPS. This is a limitation of the Roblox platform, due to coding and physics being designed for 60 FPS, which is why even though if you have a monitor that can display more than 60 frames per second, that's what you stick with. But the thing is, Roblox is actually very behind in this regard. Most everyday games we play have FPS caps that are way above 60. When I was looking into this subject, I looked into Fortnite, and it seems like the game has settings for a cap above 60, but doesn't work. I don't play Fortnite, so I don't know this stuff. Games like Minecraft, GTA 5, COD Cold War, Geometry Dash, Osu, and many more either have no FPS cap or are capped to 240 frames per second, due to gaming monitors until very recently only going this high. So therefore, certain people wanted to play Roblox at a frame rate higher than 60. What came out of it was the FPS Unlocker. When you download this application and opening it while playing Roblox, you can control your FPS with set options, or going into a file and setting your own, which means you can go ahead and play at no cap if you wanted to. So now you might be thinking, since this is changing your Roblox game, is it even legal? Well, at the Roblox Developer Conference in 2019, people had that same question, and it was then asked to Roblox employees.
First question for the client. Why does Roblox have an FPS cap, and why is it against the rules to change that cap? Yeah, great. The giggles are nice for the first question.
Yeah, so we are historically limited to 60 FPS. It's kind of how our internal system works. I'm not sure if it's against the rules to change this necessarily, but I'm sure some devs have anti-exploit scripts that try to detect speed hacks and stuff like that. We do plan on fixing this for high refresh rate monitors, but it's a small enough percentage of the market that it never was super important for us to do, but I'm hoping that we can do this basically like next year. I think I said this last RDC, but I think, next year is the year.
That's the real year.
Just adding on to that, I got this question offline too. If anyone is using the unofficial frame rate unlocker, I'm going to make a personal guarantee you will not be banned from Roblox. It's okay.
You're gonna get.
Roblox acknowledged that FPS unlockers are fully legal and allowed to be used. And last year when Roblox did a ban wave trying to target those using signups, when FPS unlocker users were in the crossfire, these individuals were unbanned and got their accounts back. As you might have heard as well in that clip, which was taken in 2019, they were planning on raising the FPS cap above 60 for 2020. Likely due to the pandemic, this is something that got changed likely. But if Roblox has acknowledged that these unlockers are fair game, and even said that they had, and probably still do have plans to raise that cap in particular, what's the fuss? Why are we capping the game to 75 frames per second in the first place? This was the message posted by Juke and updates and teasers in the JTO Discord at 3:53 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday. She says, a frame rate limiter that only allows up to 75 frames per second has been added. This is done because frames per second unlockers can give players a substantial advantage in some towers and can even be considered exploiting. We have, however, allowed the frame rate to be unlocked up to 75 frames per second, as that is the point where there is a noticeable difference in physics. So is what Juke saying true? I decided to do a very terribly not so scientific experiment. I went into a game that tests how many 12 studs you can do in a row, and decided to try and see how many I can do in 4 different frame rates: 60, 75, 144, and 240. This is one of the most common things people say that affects FPS Unlocker in terms of a change in physics. And well, here are the results. As you can see, 60 FPS is by far the worst. This can be for many different reasons. Maybe because I did these first and I wasn't warmed up, or maybe I made more mistakes on these simply. This is not a good test at all and is simply for a very, very basic idea. I didn't get a single run in the double digits at 60 FPS. Let's take a look at the 75 frames per second section now. This is where the FPS cap in JTO is. As you can see, the numbers here are in the double digits except once. Clearly a massive improvement compared to 60 FPS. Now let's take a look at 144 and 240 FPS. As you can see in Trial 2 in both of these, it seems like Juke's saying is right. All of a sudden I had a very, very high number that would be pretty much impossible to get at 60 frames per second. But while this might set off the alarm, to me I think there is something that is clear. For a typical performance, I feel like the difference between 75 and 240 in terms of this test is extremely little. If you take out the outliers in this test, which are the stupidly low and high numbers, which can coincidentally is all the second trials in this experiment, we now have this. It seems as if there is little to no change at all. All the numbers here are typically around the same. The range here is 12 to 17, which is pretty small compared to the 63 and 48 jump trials and 144 and 240 Hz. While I was playing, I thought to myself why this was the case and explained it. There is a very common issue with physics where even though you are on a block, it ignores your input and you fall. This is called a flat side, and during my 60 FPS tests, this happened often. When you try to get to the other side of these jumps, your foot can also sink in the block. Sometimes you can go to the other side and sometimes you can't. When I raised the cap to 75 and above, flat siding and going inside blocks was really rare, which made these 12 stud jumps easier. Personally, I felt very little difference from 75 to 240 in terms of doing long jumps. What higher FPS does in terms of physics is to prevent flat siding and not going inside of blocks as often, which is a common issue which can be debatable to be an error in Roblox, which should be fixed. or if it is something that is intended in the system. If we wish to determine flat sliding and going inside of blocks while jumping to be a Roblox issue, higher frame rates is a solution to make obbies more fair to play. To me and these tests, it seems in terms of doing long jumps, there is no difference between doing them at 75 FPS and 240 FPS in terms of impacting performance for the end user from my own experience on average. However, I will admit that there is quite a significant advantage here, and I did feel at first there was a drastic difference when I switched up to 144 for a couple jumps. But then, things returned to normal, and it felt like overall I was playing at 75 FPS. Now let's take a look at a different test that Yashri did that is based off of statistics rather than personal feelings. These are his results for long jumps. This shows you how much time you have from a specific spot to complete a jump. The reason why you see half and quarter frames in these numbers is because they are based off of a 60Hz monitor and not by their counterparts. There is no question that these numbers are a massive difference. Over the years, if I have learned something, one frame is an actual massive difference. So there is no doubt in my mind that this is a massive advantage compared to 60 FPS. However, I feel like physics behavior is a massive influence in this. As I stated earlier, I feel like it's more rare to say a flat side or get pushed off a block when doing a jump. When Yashri did a test at 75 FPS, he said it felt the same result as 60, around there or so. Which I think is somewhat true. I don't think the timing's changed, but the flat sliding and pushing off drastically decreased from my own experience, which can be seen from the numbers in my own tests. If you wish to see his video, it is linked below. The way this message is worded is as if 144 and 240 frame rates are a mile ahead of 75. While that might be true in a way, as we saw without any outlying numbers, and while I will admit there is a difference that is statistically true, as we saw by Yashri, and there is no doubt in my mind about that, I feel like as if I went slow and timed each jump, I could see around the same result, either if I was at 75 FPS or 240 FPS. But the thing is, long jumps is not the only thing FPS Unlocker affects. Theodoric made a really good video explaining how FPS Unlocker can help and also be a disadvantage. If you're curious as to other ways that FPS Unlocker can mess with your game, watch the video below after this one. But the fact that these long jumps are easier means that others can be as well, since it's easier to go further out. Basically any wraparound or any jump in particular is easier due to this. Theodoric's video does demonstrate how this is helpful and also a pain in the butt. The other common thing though that FPS Unlocker affects is trusses, but I couldn't come up with a test to do with trusses. However, wall hopping is very hard to do at a higher frame rate, and some jumps can be impossible to execute. In short though, FPS Unlocker does make long jumps easier, trusses are easier to an extent, with the disadvantage of some jumps being impossible and wall hopping being very difficult to execute. Before I state my opinions and such on the JTO FPS cap, I want to say that this is fully my opinion. This is to give out my own point of view and explain why I feel the way I do. This is not to convince you all to believe in me, and in no way I am saying what I am claiming is fact. A lot of my argument and views come from predictions and learning from the community. However, I will say this. I am very upset at very popular community members and staff that dealt with this. Many staff members and YouTubers have in private been very disrespectful to people who are negative towards this cap. They are calling for it to be raised or abolished entirely. People who I thought were my friends have been very disrespectful to me due to my opinions, not letting me finish talking before having an attitude towards me. So I do feel as if my own friends have betrayed me in a way, and it definitely has pissed me off. However, in my opinion, I do not support this FPS cap. I do not think this cap was a good idea at all, and allow me to explain why. In terms of a standpoint in terms of gameplay, I actually support it. I think this allows a common ground and limit to where the point has stopped, and I think it was good thinking. However, where I think the development team and Juke got wrong was us. The human aspect. I have heard many people thinking that this cap is going to help drama to be mitigated, but I have reason to believe that this won't be true, nor the case. I heard many people being happy that this cap is in place to mitigate drama between JTO players and the tiered obby community. I think this will only cause more drama with previous achievements being open to attack again. Let me explain. One of the most famous dramas in the game's history dealt with a tower that was purist. Tower of Champions Road. Boom Sazak completed the tower and got harsh people attacking him in his comments section, saying that due to his use of FPS Unlocker, his run was not legit. When I asked Boom about what frame rates he was using, he told me he used 120 FPS in small sections, but played mainly at 75 FPS. JTO's cap. People even made alts bullying those who supported Boom's achievement, and commonly the comment section had many fights with even prominent JTO community members being part of them in the comment section. I think even if Boom stuck with 75 FPS throughout his TOCR run and never used 120, I believe we would see the same amount of toxicity and issues in his comment section. So therefore, I personally do not believe this FPS cap is going to help drama. Rather, extremists can use this development decision to support their beliefs that they are in the right. I am also afraid that previous achievements that were done mainly at higher frame rates that were above 75 FPS will be up for even bigger debate. Take Crystal with Tower for example. Crystal was the first person to beat the tower fully legitimately. However, sadly she used an FPS unlocker at 144 FPS, except for one jump. This causes an issue. Is this achievement considered legit or not? That's for you to decide. However, I think you can see the issue I'm trying to bring up here. Both of these dramas, which we consider to be of the past, can now be brought back for debate. This is why I feel like this cap shouldn't have been made in the first place. Instead of helping drama be ceased, I believe it's only going to cause more. I feel like FPS Unlocker is pushed hard on too much. It still requires a crap ton of skill in order to pull off achievements like these. But we are treating these achievements as if they are exploiters and should not be trusted, which in my opinion is severely wrong. If anything, I think these individuals should get our utmost respect, even if we do not agree with their decisions. Also, since there is now an official number that's an OK spot, it will lead others to think that 75 FPS is fully legit and will now use 75 FPS instead of 60, which is actually good. In terms of JTO, it is official that 75 FPS is legitimate, but the issue is that's our own opinions and regulations. Tiered Obvious would commonly disagree with us, once again causing a clash. This transition is something I have even started to even consider myself, since officially 75 FPS is legitimate and legal, and with likely more completions at 75 underway, especially catastrophic ones, I have a feeling we will see more incidents with Tiered Obvious versus JTO players when it comes to FPS Unlocker for a whole 15 more frames. When I was attempting to explain this to individuals privately though, before I even got finished talking, I was snapped asking, "So you're saying that the cap should be at 60? My answer is absolutely not. If anything, this will cause a lot more drama, for reasons I have already discussed. Plus, looking at this table, yet again, 60 FPS is actually terrible, and will cause even more people to leave the game. Which is my next issue. Due to this update, many skilled hobbyists are leaving. Take Spitzer for example, a Tower Victor. He quit JTO due to this and used FPS Unlocker for his completions, even Tower. Many think FPS Unlocker is used for the physics, and the physics changes constitute for its ban altogether, but not many people consider the other side. Spitzer said that playing at 60 FPS causes stutters on his monitor and lag. When someone asked him to try 75, he said that there was little to no changes about this at all. I am no technical expert and will not claim to be, so I'm going to try and explain this from my own understanding as someone with expensive gaming equipment. For some reason on Roblox at 60 FPS for certain users, it causes screen tearing on their monitors, which kind of looks like this, where stuff is splitting and raised around. This occurrence can happen horizontally as well. This makes the game unplayable. It can happen at random and mess up your runs entirely. Certain users were using higher frame rates to prevent this issue. Believe it or not, a lot of people using FPS unlockers actually don't got good PCs, but due to the FPS cap raised, their input delay lowers, making the game playable for them, due to more frames being able to constitute for their inputs. These types of individuals now basically cannot play the game, as either because their screen tears, stutters, or their input delay is so high they simply can't do anything. Because of this, I feel like as if the JTO dev team did not take into consideration of their lower end device users, with a lot of people quitting or considering it because they can't play the game anymore. It's hurting the game a lot, and I'm afraid we will likely see more skilled players disappearing from the game in the future. I feel bad for these users because they don't have the money or gear to pay and relied on a higher FPS cap with an unlocker to make the game playable for them. Because of this, their entire skill has been put in jeopardy, with players having no choice but to either deal with these screen tears and immense input delay, or quit and do nothing else. I hear more people actually using FPS unlockers that have lower end PCs for the reasons of input delay than people like myself, who have expensive gaming equipment and monitors that can show us these high frame rates. Due to this update, these people have been affected negatively, and I feel bad for these people and hope something will work out for you all in the long term. Personally, after playing and doing toasted jumps with various frame rates, I feel very little difference in gameplay from 75 to 240 FPS, from my own experience and personal feel. Even when I did use FPS Unlocker in obbies outside of JTO for the kicks, I felt like FPS Unlocker wasn't an exploit or cheat, but rather a savior. I feel like FPS Unlocker makes obbies more fair and fun than anything, due to these higher frame rates as stated earlier. Typical Roblox physics issues are mitigated and are more rare to occur, which therefore makes playing for the end user, if anything, better. I think that FPS Unlocker should actually be the standard for obbies to make them more enjoyable to play. Roblox has sadly demonstrated that they have little care for the obby community, with constant physics updates that change performance for us. I think if they were to raise their cap, we would be sadly seeing no physics changes than the unlocker we have now, causing a community-wide emergency. Unfortunately, many people use FPS Unlocker for the sake of a change in physics, and many are also using it to negate negative issues with hardware. I feel like this change has a negative effect overall in our community. I think that this unlocker issue should be rethought. My personal idea is instead of banning it altogether, have it being added in as a tag in chat when you beat something, like how a boost item does. I do not think FPS unlockers should be banned in SC towers, but only catastrophic towers, as all the issue and debate I mainly see comes from catastrophic tower completions. All towers from easy to terrifying, I think using FPS unlockers should be fair game, and not catastrophic towers for the sole reason of baby tiered obvious. Statistically, there is an advantage, which is something we can agree with. Personally, I do not see it as such. I think that it helps patch Roblox physics issues, like flat sighting and such, that have been ruled with us for a very long time. I feel like in the end, it should be the user's decision if they want to use FPS Unlocker or not. I know I mainly only looked at long jumps here. I was going to include more in depth with trusses, however I feel like JTO isn't a tiered obby game that relies a lot on trusses for difficulty, and I decided not to put it here. Obviously some towers have truss leniency, but overall, JTO is more about wraps and long jumps than trusses. Plus this video is getting a little long and I don't want to bore you guys to death with more tests and statistics than I already have. Yashri does have tests though for that, so please watch that video in the description. I also think the FPS cap should be raised to 165 frames per second. Modern day gaming monitors at high refresh rates use 165 Hz. It's also a very good chance that you have technology at higher refresh rates than 60 Hz. If you have an Android phone, there's a good chance that phone has a 120 Hz screen. Do you have an iPad Pro? Yep, those use 120 Hz screens as well. Bought a television within the past few years? Those TVs have refresh rates of 120 or even 240 Hz. Slowly but surely, this equipment is going to get cheaper, and a lot of the market share is going to use higher refresh rates. I believe it is inevitable. Roblox is going to have to raise their cap in the future, which stated earlier, could end in disaster. There is no doubt, and I cannot say it enough, that there is an advantage. But I think it is unfair that users that have hardware issues that wanted to play the game can no longer have a choice but to quit. Many obbies are leaving the game, and there are going to be more issues that come out of this than solutions in my opinion and predictions. I heavily think that this update should be reverted. JTO has a notorious neglectment for lower end users, which is slowly going to cause issues. JTO is a game that is hard to get into for new players, and this is only going to make it worse. JTO is making it seem, in my point of view and opinion, that we need high-end computers and gear for stuff to be playable. Which is wrong. People like Spitzer just have no choice to leave. And as someone with gaming gear that can be argued to be overkill, it makes me very sad and upset for these people. My hearts are out to you guys. In the end, I think that this FPS cap should either be edited in the 2 ways I discussed or removed entirely. I think it is unfair and bullcrap that people with hardware issues have no choice but to quit. It's stupid that I can't use my 240Hz monitor most of the time because of Roblox's 60 FPS cap, and annoying people who cause drama due to it. But worst of all, people who are extreme at being rude and disrespectful to FPS Unlocker users, I think now have another reason to attack previous achievements now. And it feels like as if to me, JTO Development has sided with these people. This cap is just another reason for people to cause drama, and in the end, I think it will not negate it, but make it worse. While it may suck to allow what may seem as a massive advantage to be allowed, sometimes we need to consider the community and person-to-person issues that come from this rather than an even playing field. What has come out of this is insane. There has been a massive lash in terms of alts and stuff in the community, and it is causing outrage. It really depends on who you are, if you side more with gameplay or community issues. My concern are more towards the community and the future that comes with it. Due to this, I feel like an FPS cap will cause negativity and more issues and drama in the upcoming future. In my opinion, I think this is the worst development decision in the game's history. And well, that's all I have to say. This video was to share my own opinion, experience, and findings to you guys, and is not to change your opinions. Feel free to state your opinion in the description below. Thank you all very much for watching. If you're more interested in hanging out with me or hearing about video updates, you can join the Discord server, which is on screen now. Have a good rest of your day.